Welcome back to our transmission where we'll be talking about the visit of the Prime Minister to the United States of America, where he addressed the UNGA, also met the President of the United States of America, Mr. Donald Trump. Other than that, he also met the Iranian President, Mr. Rouhani, the Turkish President, Mr. Erdogan, the Chinese Foreign Minister, Mr. Wang, the Swiss Premier, the Italian Prime Minister, the British Prime Minister, as well as the President of the World Bank. Now, if we say that this particular visit wasn't only about giving a speech to the United Nations General Assembly, more of it, a lot of people do consider that this was Mission Kashmir. The Prime Minister at all the levels tried to illuminate and highlight this very important issue of Kashmir. As we all know, this is the 51st day since the curfew has been imposed there. Many people have been picked up and sent to various jails all over India. There is acute shortage of food. There is nothing to eat. This is what we've been hearing so far. And schools, universities, colleges are still shut down. A lot of problems being faced by the Kashmiri people. And on top, the atrocities by the trigger-happy Indian military, they are still going on. So these were the issues which were brought in front of the whole world while the Prime Minister was addressing the UNGA. He also spoke to the Council of Foreign Relations, where a lot of questions were put to him, and he very adequately and in a very appropriate fashion managed to handle all those and told the world what exactly is going on in this part of the world. He also requested the world leaders, especially USA, to intervene and try to diffuse the tension between the two nuclear rivals so that the South Asia in general should not suffer. Now, to talk about this, we have with us in our studio. Let me introduce you to our panelist. On my right is Ma'am Tasneem Aslam. She is a former senior diplomat. Thank you very much, ma'am, for taking out your time and being a part of our show. We also have with us Makhdoom Zain Hussain Qureshi Saab, who is an M.A. from Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. Thank you very much, sir. And we have with us Dr. Professor Zafar Nawaz Jaspal, who is also an IR expert, sir. Thank you very much. Now, ma'am, first of all, a lot of people do believe that even prior to this particular visit, the Foreign Office should have been very aggressive, should have been all over, and in particular they believe that the Foreign Minister should have managed to meet most of the world leaders and his counterparts, and the Prime Minister should have also done the same. Do you believe, ma'am, enough homework was done before the Pakistani leadership went to USA, ma'am? Your take?
Went to the UN. Well, the Prime Minister is meeting more than 30 leaders, and Foreign Minister is meeting his counterparts. He went to Geneva and he had extensive meetings there with with heads of various UN mechanisms, Human Rights Commissioner. He addressed the Council and he interacted with non-governmental human rights organizations. So it is a continuous system of engaging the world and drawing their attention to what India is doing, which again is unprecedented. No country has ever locked up 8 million people. So it's a situation that speaks for itself. While unfortunately, while we see that human rights organizations, international media, human rights activists are constantly talking about it, they are coming out, they are protesting, and parliamentarians as well. For instance, in the British Parliament, a large number of parliamentarians wrote to the Prime Minister and they put him on the spot and asked him to make a statement on what India has done. Similarly, we have seen in the US, Bernie Sanders, who's a Democratic Party leaders, one of the leaders and contender.
And also the head of the Judicial Committee.
Yes,
there, yeah?
And many other Senator Schiff, who's the Defense Committee on Defense Matters, and congressmen, large number of congressmen and women, they have spoken out, they have addressed letters to President Trump, and even a person like Brad Sherman, who is the spirit behind India Caucus and also very outspoken in favor of India, about a week ago, he tweeted and he asked his fellow Congress representatives to join him in Houston at a Howdy Moody event. But he came under so much pressure from his constituency that he backed out. He said he wasn't attending, so he apologized and stayed away. So things are happening. You cannot expect that miracle will happen. And you also have to acknowledge and accept that the governments, either because of their economic interest or because of their larger strategic agendas and policies, they will not come out and speak on human rights or on the right of self-determination of Kashmir. We have seen in the case of Palestine what has happened. Throne-throwing Palestinians become terrorists, and gun-toting, shooting straight Israeli soldiers are defenders.
And their
So
acts are
it's the
considered
same.
self-defense, yes?
It's the same situation here. That because and then we also overplay, or in our naivety we expect that the commitment to human rights values is genuine. It is not. You look at the European history. 100 years back, what were they doing? Not even 100 years. Look at some of the decisions of the US Supreme Court regarding slavery and all these issues. They're shocking. So human rights have also become a tool in the hands of powerful countries to use it to influence policies of smaller countries. So we should not have that idealism. So this is the kind of world in which we are operating. Prime Minister's visit to UNGA is just one step in the direction of creating that much pressure on the international community that they act. And by acting, I don't mean mediate. Mediation is not a question here. There are already UN Security Council resolutions on Kashmir which give Kashmiris the right to self-determination. What we need is pressure on India and also the UN systems to move towards implementation of those resolutions. It is not a new dispute in which the US President can sit and arbitrate or mediate.
So basically, if you remember, when the Prime Minister met earlier when he was visiting USA, Shah Saab, there was a statement by none other than the US President that he was approached by the Indian Prime Minister in Japan, and Narendra Modi asked him to sort of mediate or play a role where he could be an arbitrator and sort this issue out. Later on, it was totally not accepted by the Indians. They said nothing of that sort ever happened. But this time, there is a change in his stance. And the change is that now he says that if India and if Pakistan both agree, forget about the Kashmiris, nobody talked about the Kashmir, the real issue is of them. They should be the main stakeholders in it. He says, then I can do that. So this means basically he's taken a step back now, isn't it?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I would first like to endorse everything the ambassador said, and I think it has to be said that the foreign minister was also on the phone to every counterpart. I think he spoke to more than 47 foreign ministers while all of this was going on. What we need to take into account is, and both the gentlemen sitting to my right and the lady sitting to my left are experts on the matter and will be able to tell you better than I can. Foreign policy and diplomacy works at its own pace, and you have capital that you need to utilize to the best of your to get the value for your capital. I know there is a rhetoric in the country that the foreign minister should have been on a plane going to every country in the world.
Absolutely, that's what I was referring to.
But I don't think that was required. The phone calls were sufficient, and you saw as the ambassador rightfully mentioned, in Geneva that wielded results. In the OIC, it wielded results. In the European Parliament, it has wielded results. So I completely agree with what the ambassador is saying. The UNGA is not the end of it all. The Kashmir issue is not an issue that started today. The Kashmir issue is not an issue that will be resolved today. It is a constant struggle of the Kashmiri people for self-determination, and Pakistan has a very clear position on it. And we will continue to vocalize our efforts. As far as President Trump is concerned, I think it's very important to take into account Pakistan-America relations prior to this government. I think anybody sitting on this table will tell you, prior to this government and prior to Prime Minister Imran Khan coming in, US Pak relations were at all-time low. So
Practically, it was stalled.
practically stalled. So for the Prime Minister, in his initial meeting, which you have just referred to, re-engaged with the President. I think they got off to a very good start. I think that became the basis of the meeting that took place yesterday. And they have sort of, I mean, when was the last time you heard a US President speak so fondly of a Pakistani Prime Minister? And when was the last time you heard a US President actually volunteer to arbitrate or mediate between India and Pakistan?
And say that US has been unfair to Pakistan.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it was unprecedented, and that is.
You said that the former presidents never treated Pakistan wisely.
That is a very big statement for a US president to make. So for me, if you ask me personally, I think that's a foreign policy win for you. As far as his whatever his discussion with Prime Minister Modi was, he's a better judge of that. And you are absolutely right. He has shifted his stance slightly by saying that I can only mediate when both parties agree to the mediation. But then the Pakistani Prime Minister has been very clear that he, not only to the US President, but to the international community at large, that we need, this is a constantly evolving situation. And it could have catastrophic outcomes if it's not addressed. So the international community needs to tell Prime Minister Modi that he needs to come to the table, he needs to talk to Pakistan. Any conflict between two nuclearly armed nations is not only dangerous for just those two nations, but the world at large.
Absolutely.
And we really,
the
international community needs to realize that, needs to understand the importance of that, and then play a role in it. And the US President being an important member of that.
Shah, do you
community.
believe that the US President is actually aware of the magnitude of the problem, sir, and its consequences if something goes wrong?
I should certainly hope so. Yeah. I mean,
because now morality, for that matter, has been replaced totally by economic diplomacy, I would say. Dr. Saab, your take, sir.
I can take where you have said that the morality. I think that in the international politics, morality is the only word which we can use for rhetoric. Practical results always come from political, economic, and military or strategic objectives. And in that context, when we are focusing on this current situation in which the government of Pakistan, I mean Prime Minister and our Foreign Minister, they are working in a very charged, polarized environment. They are working in a situation when the new alignments have been taking place. They are targeting on the previous, you can say, American-led world, engaging American-led world in the present situation, especially by Pakistani Foreign Minister or a Prime Minister, is too difficult, especially when you are drifted on the other side. So in such a situation, when we are focusing, yes, on the Kashmir issue, we have only two weapons which we can use, and I think the government or the government functionaries, and including the other, you can say, opinion makers, everyone in Pakistan, they are doing their best to use these two weapons. One is political and one is moral, or one is with reference to the Human Rights Commission. If you see in the last, you can say, year and again this year, the Human Rights Commission reports endorse what the government of Pakistan has been articulating and continuously maintaining. Even in Geneva, everyone was sensitized and they were, you can say, making their good efforts. And at the same time, if you see, if you are judging with the morality where you raise the question, a decade back, or 1.5 decades back, the same Prime Minister Modi's visas were cancelled.
Yes, indeed.
And entire world, especially American-led world or the Europe, called him a butcher of the Gujarati Muslims. And we have seen the same person writing on the, you can say, air of the, what we call it, Hindu nationalism. And if you start looking, the definition of a rogue leadership, which you can say, one can say with reference to that, a rogue state, because he is an elected leader of the India. He violated their own constitution, decision April 2018. He violated their own constitution. He violated their own Supreme Court. He violated the United Nations, you can say, resolution. And again, he was welcomed 2 days back. What is this? This reflects that the international politics is driven not by morality, but by economics, by your domestic political tactics. Why the President Trump was meeting him or went to that stadium in Houston? Because he was targeting 4 million Indian American
He
votes.
had an
These are the
absolute
realities.
political
Your
motive behind
votes,
it.
your present situation, and in such a situation, I fail to understand when we critically examine, and many analysts have been, I mean, Pakistani analysts has been expressing, and maybe it could be that we are failing to understand what is happening in this world. Today's time, when we say this social media, which is one of the most disinformed media in the world, and every day you find new stories, you can concocted stories, and on the basis of that, we analysts are making our analysis. But in
And
the current situation, what
70%
you
of
can
those concocted stories originate from India. These
originate
are
from India.
international
That's why I'm
figures.
saying.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, our own members of the parliament, our media people, they are basing their analysis on these kind of stories. We should be very rational. I can just put like 2 points in front of the panel. One is that what is Pakistan's stance from the beginning? United Nations Security Council resolution, or if India wants bilaterally. So we are maintaining these two stances. Number two, we never own 370 article. Only what we are demanding at the moment, the curfew should be lifted, humanitarian aid should be there in the Indian occupied Kashmir, and this United Nations resolution which demands that the valley or the Indian occupied Kashmir should be free from the Indian armed forces, which is more than nearly 1 million armed forces are deployed there. In such a situation, what else we can demand? Because if you can go with the 370 article, which some people say, then we are accepting the, you can say not, we cannot say occupied Kashmir, we say annexed Kashmir, or it's a league. So in that context, we have to make a distinction. It's a very critical and very, you can say, demanding time for the Pakistani analysts, policymakers, and everyone in such a situation. I think it's a big achievement if yesterday you recall when the Prime Minister of Pakistan and the Trump met, what the Trump said. He himself admitted that he heard unexpectedly, which he was not expecting, very harsh words from the Prime Minister Modi. He himself said that both states are important, and he understands, and which you asked the question to Zain, that there's whether he is sensitized to the situation in about the South Asia. Yes, he is very much. Not only Trump, everyone, because any false flag could lead to a, once again, you can say air combat or these kind of the things and escalation, because war is a slippery road. And these are the things, and now what is the worst thing?
You don't seek war, war seeks you.
Yeah, and the worst thing which we have seen that today, that what about their now, Indian Army Chief is claiming 500 militant from Balakot has moving into the Indian Kashmir. How they can move? You have 1 million deployment. You have an
The
entire
kind of fencing
Kashmir
they've done, I mean, it's
lockdown.
impossible.
You have
Yep.
picked the children from the houses to blackmail the parents of the Kashmiri people in the valley. So again, you are still afraid. So international community has to realize, and we have to sensitize, and we have to continuously, you can say, drumming it, this kind of thing, or hammering these issues, and instead of simply criticizing, oh, one person, and I think humanly, and that is very important, humanly for a individual who is heading foreign, being a foreign minister of Pakistan or a prime minister of Pakistan, whatever it is possible they are doing. And at the same time, the government of Pakistan has to make a clear policy that who has right to speak on these issues or who are qualified, or at least if I love to speak on that issue as a government minister, I should have a first preparation or a brief from the Foreign Office. That is also very problematic sort of thing which we are witnessing within the state.
I'm talking
I
about
think, just to add to what Dr. Saab is saying, I absolutely agree with him. There are certain things that are very sensitive, foreign policy being one of them. And we have to have a very good knowledge of, because again, I think it's very important to come up with a unified front. When you're going to the international community, it's very important that people sitting on TV make responsible statements. Because you're just giving, and as you have seen, as has happened in the last 24, 48 hours, Indian media picked up on statements made by a cabinet minister, and that just should not happen. I mean, there are so many things for us to have a difference of opinion on, but this is not one of them. The matter of Kashmir is something every Pakistani
it's a very
takes.
unified approach. It needs to be
Absolutely.
very, very calculated. The choice of words.
So whatever
should be
message is coming out of Pakistan has to be the same as well. That's very important, and I agree with what Dr. Saab is saying.
Ma'am, now talking about this Mission Kashmir, Prime Minister, wherever he has met, he's gone, he has met most of these leaders, he's going to meet more of them on the sidelines of the UNGA. Ma'am, now Mission Kashmir, on one side, a lot of countries do believe that it's an international issue and it should be resolved according to the UN resolutions. Now, number two, Indians, they claim that it's a bilateral issue, but still they're not ready to talk. On the other side, countries like USA, they believe that if these two countries want, we can play our role. But talking about the role, ma'am, don't you think this is very important if somebody wants to play a positive role, or for example, if they have that kind of an influence where they can persuade either of the parties, or even on humanitarian grounds, they should do it on ASAP basis. Why wait?
About the international community's role. International community role can be to arrange for the implementation of the UN Security Council resolutions. That means paving the way for holding a plebiscite wherein Kashmiris can decide their future. That is one. Two, in immediate terms, pressurize India to lift curfew and remove the curbs they have put, and stop torture and ethnic cleansing. These are immediate. This is urgent. This should have happened yesterday. And then self-determination resolution, implementation of the resolution. We don't, frankly, we don't need a granddaddy to sit there and mediate between Pakistan and India. What is there to mediate? The framework under which the resolution of the Kashmir dispute is to be found is already there. We don't need somebody to come and tell us that no, this is the new framework under which you will resolve the Kashmir dispute. So I think we should put less emphasis on mediation and say no to arbitration. There is no question about that. So this discussion becomes immaterial whether President Trump changed his stance or he's still talking about. It is important because what he's saying is once again reaffirming the US position that yes, US considers Jammu and Kashmir a dispute. So its importance is only to that extent. Secondly, somebody mentioned that Trump said he did not expect Modi to make such an aggressive statement. And he repeated it 3 or 4 times that it was a very aggressive statement. I wasn't prepared for it. Essentially, he was distancing himself from what Modi had to say at that forum. Trump had gone there to launch his re-election campaign. Yeah, so that's very obvious. Then you said move beyond bilateral. India would say bilateral. No, India is not saying it's bilateral anymore. India is now saying this is our internal issue. We don't have anything to discuss with Pakistan. So what they say they need to discuss with Pakistan is Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan, number one. Number two, that Pakistan should stop sending terrorists. So there is slight modification, their talking points to the world. They are not saying to the world that no, this is don't intervene, we don't need your intervention, we will talk to Pakistan bilaterally and we'll resolve it. Now they are saying that yes, we have an issue to discuss with Pakistan, that is Pakistan's occupation of our territory. And when other ministers can make statements, army chiefs can make statement or interior minister and others, but when the foreign minister makes a statement, it needs to be taken as policy. And Jaishankar in his press conference said that our next target is taking Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. We have to take this seriously, and we need to look at it at 3 tiers.
And those are?
Yeah. First, they're trying to deflect now and put pressure on Pakistan. That okay, you're talking about IOK, forget about it. Try to save Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan because that is our next aim. 2, those who are opposed to CPEC, and you know that there are countries that are, they would do anything to stem China's accession to number 1 in status in the world as the global superpower number 1. So BRI and CPEC as part of BRI, CPEC is also seen with
As a threat.
great concern and as a threat. And
Expansion
there have
of the
been,
Chinese influence,
and we
basically, in
know that
Europe
there
and
have
in
been
Asia.
efforts to sabotage it. A lot has happened, and we all know what's going on. So if something starts on Azad Kashmir, Gilgit, Baltistan, where is CPEC? CPEC is derailed. So I don't know. I could just I'm just guessing that perhaps at some stage there may have been discussions on that at some
You think so?
in
Ma'am,
some places.
one
Thirdly,
one
the
quick-
third level,
Third is?
is that you would see that now the Western world, those who are interested, particularly some in the Western media, Voice of America or BBC, they have been pushing a third option. There have been discussions, and there was a recent report, I think on BBC or Voice of America, that Kashmiris in Azad Kashmir want independence. So there can be
That's what our Prime Minister said as well. Let the Kashmiris decide.
Our Prime Minister did not say. Our Prime Minister said Kashmiri aspirations come number one. I am not going to decide for them, and that is in the Constitution of Pakistan, Article 257 of this Constitution. And this, incidentally, this article has been in every constitution that Pakistan has had. That once plebiscite is held, and if Kashmiris opt to join Pakistan, the future relationship between Pakistan and Kashmir will be mutually decided. And so we have kept that option of aspirations, but UN Security Council resolutions give Kashmiris two options, and that is the legal framework, India or Pakistan. What happens subsequently when Kashmiris join, how you discuss and formulate that relationship between Kashmir and Pakistan, that is there in the Constitution. But those who are now talking about it, the objective could be either completely derail the process, move it away from the UN Security Council resolutions, or have a small state atop China which can also provide bases. So we don't know what who is thinking what and what agendas are at work. But
basically,
this is
it's not
a
only to sort of put a check on Pakistan, but primarily it seems that the game is much larger. I mean, we were hearing about another aircraft carrier by the UK to be sent into the South China Sea, sir, and they have said that don't do that. So the cases with the two vessels and rather the huge assets of the USA in this part of the region, sir, trying to encircle China in all the possible ways. CPEC on certain decisions, maybe wrong decisions by the Indians, could be halted for the moment. But what about the BRI? I mean, their expansion plan is much larger, over $1 trillion they plan to spend in the next few years, and then maybe more at some stage. So primarily, I mean, if the war is again between the two major powers, one is China, one is USA, don't you think again countries like Pakistan will suffer?
I think what needs to be said here is, and this is something both America and China are now publicly saying, is that it is a trade war between the two. They don't mince their words about it when they say it. And
they have openly stated, the Americans have said that the Chinese are the biggest enemy at the moment.
Precisely. So when that's happening, I look at it in a slightly different manner. I look at it as a huge opportunity for Pakistan as well. As the ambassador again rightfully pointed out, the port of Gwadar and the entire CPEC, the concept of CPEC, alarms a lot of people. It makes a lot of people uneasy. It makes a lot of people in the Middle East very uneasy because, again, you have the largest deep sea port, which will give Western China access to warm waters. This entire CPEC corridor opens up so many opportunities for Pakistan, whether it's economic.
At some stage, the Russians would be your partners.
Absolutely. If you
these
look at the
Central
larger
Asian countries would also
if you
get
look at
benefit
the
from that?
larger BRI concept, then that's exactly what it is: connecting
Yes.
the Central Muslim states, connecting Russia, connecting China. So, to answer your question, it puts Pakistan in a very strategic position, and if we can play our cards right in the coming years, I think it is a huge opportunity for Pakistan to avail.
Are we playing the cards right, sir?
I mean, given what we have, because again, it's all about the cards you're dealt with. You have to play the cards you're dealt with. Given the way the CPEC negotiations took place, I mean, we can have another conversation about that another day. With what we have right now, I think absolutely. And Pakistan has been very clear in its dealings with the Chinese and with America, for that matter. We need CPEC. I mean, there's no two ways about it. Pakistan, the Pakistani economy, and the way things were progressing, this is a huge, again, game changer for Pakistan, if you'd allow me to say. And I think we're playing our cards well, and I see this bringing lots of opportunities for Pakistan.
Dr. Saab?
I think that when you talk about are we playing cards well, definitely you have to identify on which table are you sitting, on which way you are sitting. Pakistan has been in the war zone since last 40 years. And since the very beginning, our pivotal position has been recognized by the United States, and that's why we were their frontline state. We have shifted in our foreign and strategic policy and stopped playing their knights, which were chosen knights, as an ally of the Americans against the Chinese, and that's why your all cards are now open. In that context, when you're looking about these cards playing well, we cannot ignore that systematically India has been bet by the Americans as their Asia-Pacific ally. So much so that the Americans changed their Asia-Pacific strategist nomenclature and declared it Indo-Pacific strategy.
Absolutely.
If you read in June, I think, or July this year, there was Indo-Pacific strategy release document by the United States, and then 2018 nuclear posture review of the United States, and then 2017, on 18th December, National Security Strategy of the United States. In all these three documents, starting from the 2017 till 2019, you will find where they talk about China, intensity or a focus has been increased. Now, in that context, Chinese are also very much sensitive in that context. They start talking about, the Malacca dilemma in 2003 when President Hu said, and now they are making a OBI and CPEC. Their OBI has shifted, interestingly, a big shift in the intellectual discourse, because the OBI is very much based on the international economic liberal order. And now the Trump or his allies, they are talking about mercantilist system. In such a situation, definitely, and what the Chinese have now announced, around, I think, 3 billion plus projects in the Iran. So in that context, whatever the situation could be, Pakistan is very significant. But when you say cards, what is that? We had an advantage this year to move ahead with the CPEC, engaging the United States, playing our positive role in Afghanistan. At once what happened that since the last 8-9 months, we are on a high alert. States whose armed forces are on a high alert and which has been suffering from the 40 years war.
Engaged.
How you can say, I think that we are playing our cards well. We should be confident. We should be very much rational. But when we are critically examining the outcomes, we should also see that what is our capacity, what are our challenges, and which way we are heading. Unfortunately, in such a situation, if you see, even everyone is projecting India's rising economy, and I just came across one report in which they were saying that they were going up. If you see, their economy started going down. It's a 5% growth last month. And with that, they are also very much, when they are in a conflict, we are very much there. But you have to see that what are the cards when we're playing? That is because of your geostrategic location or situation that on 16th August, first time after 50 years, United Nations Security Council, at least that forum heard the Kashmir, you can say, voice.
So would you consider that the diplomatic victory for Pakistan?
I think, and it was so much that if I am looking as a student of international politics, that what was its impact, that the Indian Defense Minister rushed to the Pokhran and he made a statement, no first use. So it means that they are signaling, this is a problem. The problem is that we are living in an era or in a world, especially we Pakistanis, we only read the English. And English literature or English-led word is very much drifted towards the India. Have you seen that India has deployed their nuclear assets in the sea? Sea lands, especially Indian Ocean sea lands, they are very much now vulnerable to these kind of the deployments. And despite that, I haven't seen even a single article coming from the American analysts who claim themselves as South Asian experts or the Indian Ocean experts that they are raising this concern that a state which has a deployed
They've always
nuclear
said that
assets.
this area, or in particular the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean, should be nuclear free.
Yeah, that they have deployed the nuclear assets. They have talked about the shifting of their rhetoric. We consider rhetoric, but from the no first to the first use, it means that they have already delegated. No one is talking about. So maybe that's the reason that in the last 7, 8 months, it can be a Pakistan's political, diplomatic, moral, or whatever way of looking these things. If you start looking constructively, I'm not talking about advocating constructively, that you have pushed a biggest baby of the entire world, who is a, you can say, very much engaged by the Americans as their, you can say, local Leviathan in the Indo-Pacific, who is a balancer, who they view as a balancer to the China. But again, for the sake of their security, with the mighty conventional forces, they are signaling the nuclear. So this is the point I think we have to take into account, that in the current situation, we are playing our cards very well. Whether the opportunity because of the shift in the geostrategic environment, but certainly when your state is suffering from the last 10, 15 years because of the economic crises, we develop ourselves as a rented kind of a state. They're getting from this. But we fail to understand, if you see a string of pearls, where are you? Geostrategically, your Gwadar is a pearl in that string of pearls.
Absolutely.
So if you are looking about today, Iranian Rouhani met Prime Minister Imran Khan. Despite that, he visited Saudi Arabia and went there. So this is I think you are playing your cards very well, keeping in mind your significant. Now, if you expect a results, a world which is driven by the military and economic interest, and you start expecting that they start hammering or going with you. Yes, yesterday when they were, day before yesterday at Houston, they were making a, you can say, inside of the stadium there was a Prime Minister Modi and President Trump. Outside of the stadium, what were the slogans?
People were chanting slogans, they were
That's
holding the
I
placards,
think
yes.
this is your significance. This is your way of looking the policies. Yes, if we can criticize ourselves, but with objectively, we need to do more work. I can say we need to be more act confidently and rationally. We have to do these things, but at the same time, simply saying that because of our geostrategic location, we are becoming a very much politics in a geoeconomics, in a geopolitical setting, very significant. Yes, we are significant, but naturally we have to work hard.
All right. Now, ma'am, a quick comment on this very important area, because when we talk about the economic diplomacy, I think that's the key. Number one, you talk about the strategic interest. Obviously, the Americans really want Indians to be very powerful in the region, to actually not only look after this side, but to also look after the other side, the Chinese, because
Yes.
whenever you see their development regarding their missile technology, otherwise, they're always targeting Beijing and beyond. So, or maybe they're up to making these intercontinental ballistic missiles also. The Americans, they have also shown support that we'll be able to use your bases, you'll be able to use our bases, intelligence sharing. For example, even the company McDonnell Douglas and the other one, Lockheed Martin, they have said that they'll be developing, they'll be having joint ventures, and they'll be developing F-21s there, which is a super version of F-16. Maybe their wings would be developed, like what they do. The Israelis are supporting them that, okay, buy the Rafales, okay, we'll upgrade them. And they'll be getting the first one in October. What I'm saying is that they are getting the best out of the best. Look at the Indian Prime Minister when he goes to Iran. Rouhani meets him and they talk about Mirza Ghalib for that matter. He goes to Israel and the Israeli Prime Minister says that, well, we have been waiting for you for the last 20 years. He goes to Saudi Arabia, gets the highest civil award. He goes to Bahrain, same thing happens. UAE supports him. So, ma'am, don't you think now we need to stop looking at those countries through the prism of the Indians, and we need to engage them? For example, if there are more than 48% Indians in UAE, they have an influence. That makes the difference.
Yes, but then also looking at each country on its own merit. Our relationship with Iran, which is far more important for us in terms of what is happening in our immediate neighborhood with immediate neighbors, Iran is far more important. Whether it's with reference to Afghanistan, what happens there, after a long time, Pakistan, Iran, Russia, China have evolved similar thinking on Afghanistan, on the way forward. So that is one issue. Then the efforts to destabilize are directed against Iran as well and Pakistan as well. Sometimes our borders are used. Terrorists come from Afghanistan or they enter from Afghanistan into Pakistan and then Iran. So we need to block these. Then because of sanctions, we have issues in buying currency, buying things in dollars. Why don't we resort to barter or maybe currency,
That's what
local
we're doing
currency?
with Iran, by the way.
Not
But
to
at
the
a larger
extent,
scale you're talking about. Yeah.
not to the extent where it is required. Then Iranians have been interested in connecting Chabahar to Gwadar. Why can't we do that? India wants to use Chabahar to enter Afghanistan.
Yes.
If we have Chabahar is connected with Gwadar and it becomes part of
That's what
you
Mr.
know
Rouhani said, that it is going to complement Gawada rather than competing with it. So let's see.
So,
So there are
why can't
multiple
we
options, but as earlier mentioned that we need to play our cards very wisely. And this is the time because it's now or never, I guess. But anyway, ma'am, I was just told that we're totally running out of time.
Okay,
but thank you
right.
very much for your participation, sir. It was a pleasure having you. Thank you so much, Dr. Saab. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you again tomorrow at 8. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.